Hello. Hello, everybody, and welcome again to our not bi-weekly dev stream. My name is Matt. Sorry for the slight start delay. We tried to get in early, and as things happen, Murphy's Law always strikes. So hopefully everything is good. How are all of you in chat doing? It's been a while. We haven't done this in a little bit. Um, Max, how are you doing? Mark, how are you doing?
I'm
Really good.
good. I'm to add to the potential for technical difficulties. I'm currently not at my usual stream location, so that will make things extra exciting here, Matt. But no, it's exciting. It's good to be back talking about our first update of 2024. We always the first update always feels like a nice fresh start after the holidays. The team usually has a bit of a rest, and then we get right back to it, which is what we've been doing since the new year. And as a recap, last year we released the Naval Warfare update in fall, and we did a follow-on update right before the end of the year with update 55. We're able to knock off a bunch of bugs and make a bunch of small changes, follow on large update. But now we're back. The goal right now is to do 4 updates this year. Obviously plans can always change. Development can be unpredictable, but that is the current target and goal. And the first of the 4, update 56, is what we're going to be talking about on stream today. And I had mentioned this in the dev blog late last year that the focus this year is going to be to go back and iterate and refine on existing systems rather than build out entirely new ones. So that will be definitely a part of update 56. As mentioned, we're also going to be releasing 2 new naval vehicles, which is very exciting. Naval vehicles are special because they require a lot more effort to create, and they're very exciting new content for us. But yeah, without further ado, I think we can jump in and get things started here.
Awesome.
Yeah, but before we jump into the update, there is something neat that I want to talk about, something we haven't done in a while, and it is relating to art and the community. So I've obviously super biased, but I really believe Foxhole has one of the best art communities in all of gaming, really, and it's been like that for the last 7 years, even back when there were less than 100 people playing the game. We've always been excited about art from the community. Art has been very high quality. We've seen some really, really cool stuff over the years, things that just completely blow our minds. So we had held an art contest in the past, and we're going to come around and do another one. We really want to celebrate the last, it's actually been 8 years now, or close to. Maybe not quite, but I like to round up to make it sound cooler. But yeah, we're celebrating 8 years of Foxhole Community Art by running an art contest. There's going to be, the theme of it is going to be naval action. So it's going to be a naval focused art contest. There will be some small but fun prizes involved here. And it's about a 2-month time frame. Submissions are going to be in May. There's a lot more details about this, so this is just going to be an announcement. But to get the more detailed information, if you want to participate, go to foxholegame.com, and you'll be able to find out more information if you want to participate. But we're super excited about this. Again, Foxhole Community Art has just been very dear to our hearts for a very long time, and yeah, we're very excited about this.
Some people are asking for some details about like rules or whatever already in the chat. Go check out the post that when it goes up. Is it up already or is it not yet?
If it's not up, it should be coming up at some point during the stream. So
Okay.
look out for it. And again, if it doesn't come up now, it's going to be either shortly after or sometime today. So look out for that. All right, let's talk about the update. So the first part of the stream, I want to talk about the little things. I like to think about it as the little improvements, things that aren't flashy but are important and impact um, things at a smaller scale. So first thing here, triple stacked shipping containers. This is something that is not always possible to do, but when it is done, interacting with all the shipping containers in the stack have it's not always been smooth, but now we support that more properly. So being able to access that third shipping container, that second shipping container more consistently, we've gone back to smooth that over and make sure that is a properly supported feature in the game. Next thing up, being able to customize colors on your containers. This is something we have had on shipping containers for a very long time. And we always like to give players as many tools as they can to manage things in a way that they think is appropriate, as opposed to us trying to manage things for them. So the liquid containers are the next thing that now have the same capability as the shipping container. And the same thing is going to be brought to the uh, resource containers. And again, this just sort of, we see this as coming back around and applying the feature that we had on one set of containers to all three of them. So that goes along with the theme of trying to go back and try to complete these things, these features that we started, right? Next thing here on the bluefin, we know that retrieval times have been a bit of a sore point, so we've taken a look at that, significantly brought them down, and we hope that will be a helpful change. Next one here, weapon attachments now stay on weapons when they're holstered. So we went back to look at weapon attachments. There's some other related changes here that you could check out in the release notes. For example, now when there's an attachment on a weapon, it's shown on the icon in the UI, in the inventory interface, which is another companion change to this. And yeah, just going back, making sure that these smaller features have these little extras that we really thought should have been there from the start. Getting to the critically wounded soldier and soldier supply. So this is a feature that has had a bit of a history. In the past, when we've had larger than usual wars, these are usually during the major update wars, when soldier supplies are more scarce due to the high volume of players, especially at the start of the war. A balance levers that we've adjusted to add in a custom rule for those wars has been to increase the amount of soldier supplies per critically wounded soldier. But we decided that really should be a permanent change, also because that feature of critically wounded soldiers and hospitals has been a feature that we've been really excited for a long time, and we wish it could be used more often. We've definitely seen some cool scenarios come from that during last stands and other situations, and we really just think that should just be a long-term change in the game. So we're hoping to see more field hospitals and more people taking on the role of bringing critical soldiers back to those hospitals.
Could you read the text there, because the way that Discord puts our cameras and we can't move them, no one can read that.
It says critically wounded soldier chance and soldier supply yield has been increased. So
sorry about that. It's just the way that
no
Discord
problem.
does things. We can't move the cameras.
Well,
sorry, guys.
Hopefully that's the worst of the technical issues. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving on to the next set of changes. One of the big small changes has been revisiting um, local and squad voice chat. So one of the things we've done is finally added separate volume sliders for each of these, which players have been asking for years now. So now you can customize all three of those volumes. We have a hotkey now where you can toggle local and squad voice chat on and off. And when you do using a hotkey, and when you do so, it will give you feedback in the text chat channel, so which indicates whether it's currently switched on or off. And this again is another part of our review of voice chat. And finally, I think this one will be well appreciated. It's also been a much highly requested feature, which is being able to customize the volume on a per player basis. So when you bring up the player context menu now, you're able to set a custom volume for that particular player. So that's the set of voice chat changes, and voice chat has just been such a central part of Foxhole for a very long time, and we're finally glad to offer these extra quality of life improvements there. So his next one, I hope you guys appreciate this image here. Is actually a funny backstory. We want to thank I Saw a Bear for his gift to us to remind us of the server hamster holding everything together. So thank you, I Saw a Bear, for this gift. But to talk about this issue for a few moments, at the start of the year, we were hit with some server stability issues relating to our infrastructure and Steam networking, and we were able to overcome some of those issues through hot fixes. It took a bit longer than we obviously would have liked, but we got through of the major issues, especially the ones around traveling at the border. We were able to overcome some of those issues. But in Update 56, there's going to be more changes that are going in. We really wanted to have gotten these changes in back when we were doing the hot fixes, but some of them were just too hard to put into a hot fix. But some of these are going to be coming, and they will mitigate, or rather make the servers more durable moving forward against the similar classes of external factors that had caused some of these issues at the start of the year. So this is an ongoing thing. When you have an online game, there's always you're always going to be hit here and there with the climate of the internet and other issues. So it's a constant battle, but we're going to be on top of it, and we're going to be constantly keeping a close eye, and we're hoping that these set of changes will help smooth things over, at least against those specific issues that we saw. Next one here. This one is an interesting one. We know that certain members on the team have been very passionate about this change, even though it's a very almost it's the biggest of the big small changes. Right now with automatic weapons, if you target outside of its field of view, or its firing angle, rather, the fire stops and then you have to re-engage after. But this now will automatically resume, which this has been a really frustrating quirk of our user interface. The other thing you can do is you can also begin to cue the shots when you're outside of the appropriate range, or the appropriate firing angle. And when you bring it back in range, it'll start firing. So this is one of those really small things that impacts a lot of people on a moment-to-moment basis. It's a touch and feel improvement, but we know that certain members on the team were very frustrated about this one for a long time, and it was often pushed in favor of larger features. But again, going along the theme of refining and iterating, we finally come back around to this. And to wrap up this section, there's more than a dozen other small improvements that you can go read in the release notes, and we're happy that we finally got around to them. So be sure to check out the release notes because there's more changes in here. And yeah, that wraps up the improvement section. All right, well, let's move on to facilities. This is the next section of the stream. We're going to be talking about facilities, and we're going to start with a video. All right, Max, I'll hand the reins over to you for this part.
Great. So I'll try my best to explain what's going on, but with some disclaimer here that this is a pretty. It's going to be difficult to explain exactly how it works until you guys actually get into the game and see it. We'll have some videos later to sort of highlight it, but to go over the main goals of these changes, facilities in general, where we think we succeeded was in a lot of you guys would create small groups of players and go off and build your own facility. And we've seen a lot of interest in things like optimizing that facility. We've seen tools pop up online that help you plan out your facility. So we know that people are having fun with the actual construction and building of these facilities. What we're hoping to improve, however, is that we've noticed that a lot of these really large mega facilities tend to be isolated towards just a small number of players. And the net reality of that is most of these large facilities end up showing up around logistics town. And when you come at this from a new player perspective, or even just a general player perspective who's just happens to be in these logi towns, it feels like these big, sprawling mega facilities are like basically giant blocks of land that are completely useless to you as a player. And we really didn't like how that felt. So what we were aiming to do here was try to make facilities more public without compromising the private flow, the private workflow of trying to produce. Like, for example, if you wanted to build a battle tank for your clan, we didn't want to disrupt that flow, but we did want to make them feel more public, more team oriented. And where we think that we can bring all parties together is that we believe many private facility owners actually would love to have other people come and visit their facility. The only issue has been in the past that they didn't have an avenue to do this without compromising their own workflows. If you were building a battle tank facility and you invited public people to come in, all that would do is jam up your production line, and that created problems. So what we're hoping to do here is marry everybody together. We want private facility owners to feel comfortable opening up the facility so that everybody can use it and everybody can get a chance to sort of see the public facility gameplay. So the way this works, getting into the nitty gritty, is there's essentially a try to imagine this facilities are going to work similar to the refinery. For those of you who are not familiar with Logi, the way the refinery works is any number of people can walk up to a refinery and start refining, say, salvage into basic material. And then if any additional player comes to start refining stuff, it doesn't slow down your production. So what we did was try to take parts of that and bring it into facilities. And what we got is up to 5 people now can run an order on a facility with no ill effect. So imagine you're an existing facility today. You walk up to the facility, you can't really do anything. A lot of stuff is squad locked. Now everything is open. You can touch it however you want. And however you touch it, it's not going to impact the people who built this facility. So if they're running their own operation to build battle tanks, you can come up, use the facility in parallel to them. I won't go over the finer details of these points uh, explicitly because it's really hard to uh, explain without like visual aids. But the bottom line being that this will also will affect things like the oil wells, the water pumps, the harvesters. So now you guys may notice, a lot of you who have gone to a field to mine, say, components, you may have noticed the large harvesters sitting on the field. You may know that they are used for gathering materials, but you could never actually interact with them. Usually those were locked behind one or two people. The goal here was to allow everybody to use them without necessarily compromising the people who built it. They should still be able to run their process, but now we have to share. It
So
also,
just
sorry, go
oh, I was going to just ask you a quick question about the 5 players, just to be extra clear. So if previously you were the only player that was able to produce an order, but now if there's 4 other players, um, they can also queue up an order and using the same amount of power, and nothing slows down. Is that accurate?
Yep, that's absolutely accurate.
Great.
And what's more is we're hoping to improve on the collaboration. The stockpiles for these facilities have always been public, but you've never really had a good way to interact with it. So what we implemented was there's a separation of personal and public orders, where if you are running a public order, for example, you can pull from the public stockpile without necessarily pulling it out of the stockpile and then putting it into your order. What we wanted was to be able to create a situation where it was possible for a facility to exist entirely in the public space, where you're creating stuff for other people to use, and other people could frictionlessly utilize those resources by like running their own orders um, or moving it from one facility to the other. All of that we wanted to support.
Great. I'll start this video and um, we can walk through it.
All right, so in this video, just imagine this is like a player who doesn't actually own this facility, didn't build this facility. These are all things that we'd expect a brand new player to be able to do. So he's walked up to the facility, he's got a bunch of coke, he's put it into that private slot there. You might recognize that as similar to the refinery. So like nobody can take from that slot, and then he's retrieved it as crates. So these crates are also reservable. They can be brought to like a storage depot and then stored. So even an individual player who doesn't own the facility has a way of keeping their resources for their next play station or the next play session. And now we're watching the public flow. So this is one where you see a lot of people are putting resources into a public stockpile. There's an overabundance, and the player can run an order without actually bringing any materials to it. So we're walking over now. You can see that one of these players has put in an order on the harvester. They themselves are going to run sulfur or run a production order to create sulfur here or to mine the sulfur. And then this player, who is again a public player, walks up and can use it themselves. The balancing around these is that they are more supplemental to your mining, so you might still want to use a harvester vehicle, but they are, because up to 5 people now can be running these at a time. They're not as good as they used to be, but they're still pretty good.
Great. Let's move on to power.
Cool. So again, I'm not going to get too much into the finer details of this because it's without the visual aid, it's pretty hard to explain. But bottom line here is we understand that power is going to be one of those limiting factors. If just anybody can walk up to your facility and then stop your facility by, creating a new order, that's a problem, right? We don't want the existing facility owners to feel strained by having public people show up. So in this case, the power will now scale down with how much power is being consumed. So if somebody comes up and adds a new order, starts a new production line, and for some reason that like there's not enough power to supply it, all that's going to do is slow down the production across the facility. And so hopefully the people who are managing the facility will be able to come over here and then turn things on, turn on more power, or redirect resources, or redirect the power lines, to try to sort of like fine tune it. The gameplay will be that the owners of the facility are essentially managers of that facility, as opposed to like the sole proprietor, sole operator. They would manage it to help smooth out the power demands. We had to do a lot of work with the UI to help it a little bit more clear, because in the past there's just in previous iterations there's been it was difficult to figure out what was going on with power, but now we hope that the new power widget will help and be unified across all facilities, so it's not confusing as you go from one structure to the next.
There's a quick video demonstrating some of the power scaling.
So what we're looking at here is the widget. You see the power widget on the right side. There's -6 power being consumed. The energy is, its efficiency is low, which means that the production is running slower. And then say you walk up to another facility, you want to turn it on for whatever reason. You can start the production and you'll see it drops to -9 and the facility continues to run. Things are just operating slower. On the other side of the coin, at the power plant itself, if not enough stuff is running, for example, like the if you've got like one facility running and you're producing 12 power, as long as it's above a certain threshold, you'll also consume fewer resources. So you're not wasting resources by not having facilities running. This allows you to, again, just sort of like leave power plants running in the event that, you might want to encourage public players to come show up, but you might not have all the input resources right away. So you might want to leave your power plants running, and we didn't want to penalize you for doing that. So now the cost of running power plants is reduced.
So would you say the amount of manual babysitting around power has been somewhat reduced?
Yeah, yeah. Goodness, I hope so.
Yeah, I certainly know when you and I, Max, we did our personal play sessions with facilities, that was a sore point for like the both of us. So
Yeah,
very
man.
excited. Yeah.
I think for me, one of the main drivers for these changes was I logged in and played for a solid week, just building my own facility during one of the most recent wars. And one of the most frustrating things for me was I actually just wanted to help people. I just wanted to see if I could jump on somebody else's facility and just like help somehow. But for whatever reason, every facility that I came up to, the owners would always just redirect me to mine some for them. Just like go get some scrap, and that'll be you. And that was it. That was all I could do. And then even when I tried to like go up to those facilities and put things in for myself, everything was locked, right? And we of
Yep.
course know this. It's just difficult to it walking in with that sense of like I'm a new player, putting that in your frame of mind and being like, what would a new player feel in this situation? I can understand entirely why a lot of people shy away from facilities. So again, going back to the main goals of facilities here, was trying to encourage people to help each other, to work together and bring people on, as opposed to just sending them off as like essentially laborers. Right. So there's a number of other changes that came along with this. Some of these things might seem strange. Again, it's because a lot of stuff had to change in order to make these changes work. Just for workflow purposes, for privatization of resources, everything had a lot. There were a lot of corner cases that we had to cover. So there's one of the things we changed was the liquid transfer stations and the resource transfer stations are now public. We believe there are still methods for storing these resources privately, but you won't be able to do it on these platforms anymore. These platforms are now designated for public use. They're used for like getting people to work together. You can now configure a pipe to only take a single resource. This is just a requirement. Like pipes in general, I think we'd like to spend some more time with. So we've changed a lot of things with pipes, including how much like liquids go through them, how much can be stored at each facility. We've dramatically increased like the storage tanks of like the fuel silos. So there's other ways to store liquid and ways to queue it up so that they can go into like power plants and things to make them run for longer. The reserve multiple foundations, that's now when you reserve multiple, it'll reserve things through the foundation as well. So if it's a connected foundation, you can like the big one that that we really wanted to include was the maintenance funnels. You'd have to often reserve that one specifically. You'd have to walk up to it and then reserve it, and there was no way to connect it with power or with pipes, so it didn't reserve appropriately. Now it should. As well as the material transfer stations will also, I think the material transfer stations will also reserve as long as they're on the pad. We increased the demolish action timer. What we found was that originally we set this to a week, and we may yet have to dial this down, but we didn't. We found it somewhat arbitrary that you wouldn't be able to remove a structure after a period of time, and that wasn't really well communicated to the players. So we just extended this timer. You should be able to demolish it for up to 4 weeks. Another supporting change was the assembly station. So this was, again, one of the quirks of having facilities privatized was that if you squad locked an assembly station, anything that came out of it was locked to the squad that owned the assembly station, which was especially frustrating for players that were trying to use it that weren't a part of the squad, because you could often start a process to create a vehicle, come back, and you actually couldn't even access it because it was claimed by the squad. So that was extremely frustrating. And so we've created a system here now where you can squad claim it, sure, but if you are if you're starting an order, you'll be able to sort of lock it for when you come back. Facility modifications are refunded. Yeah, I think these last 2 points, it's pretty much speak for themselves.
Cool. So there's one more facility change that we want to show, and best demonstrated in a video. So.
You just want to talk about what's going on here?
Oh, yeah.
I actually want this one to speak for itself, Matt. But I will say that something seems to be missing here, and that thing that's missing is the maintenance modifier. That has been removed, finally. This is something that we had been wanting to do for a long time, but it's difficult to talk about because it's something that wasn't a guarantee, right? And I want to talk about some of the reasons and context behind this. So we know that structure decay has always been a challenging issue for players. In the past, we had the garrison supply system, and we introduced some tools last year in the form of main supplies to allow players to better manage which structures are being supplied, and also a way for players to produce their own supplies at their facilities. And then we had the modifier. So one of the concerns when we made these changes last year is the many ways it could impact server performance. And a lot of these issues we knew wouldn't be visible until we actually had thousands of players in the world building structures in a real world environment. We obviously like to do as much performance analysis as we can offline, but at the end of the day, real world player patterns can often reveal things that reveal problems that you wouldn't see otherwise. So we came up with the modifier system as a safety measure to manage performance and to tune the system to provide us to do two things. One is to make sure if there are issues, it will it will be accounted for. By issues, I mean too many structures in a certain location. And the other thing that it also provided with us was a lot of data that we needed to make the longer term changes. And our goal for this system always was to put this in, but at some point, once we're confident with player build patterns, with the maintenance supply system, that we could remove it. And finally, we've been through enough iterations, enough updates where we have the confidence. So as of update 56, the Subregion Modifier is going to be completely gone. So that will no longer be an issue game. And yeah, I think this, I predict, will be one of the again, going back to the big small features. This one is probably the new biggest small feature. So happy to have this one in.
Don't make us regret this, players.
Yes, be responsible with your building. Is what Max is saying. Okay, let's move on to Naval, and we'll also start this with a short video.
Quite a few things to unpack in there.
Yes, we'll start with ocean border travel. So this is an interesting change. In this one, actually, I know some of it came from the team, but I also saw this suggestion floating around in the community. And that is to be able to travel from the east border of the ocean to the west side, and vice versa. And one of the issues that we've or limitations that we knew going into the naval update and the creation of the new maps expansion of the world is that east-west wars would be more limited in terms of the naval content, just because two sides, the two major naval sets of naval regions, would be not connected. So one of the things we've done now is we've connected the two, and we hope that this will provide a lot more avenues for naval content. So God Cross and Oarbreaker, Tempest Island and Fisherman's Row, Fingers, and Steamer Landing are now hooked up, and you can travel between those sites. This will just be
But wait, there's more.
Quick. No, it's just a quick demonstration. So as you can see on the east border now, when you hover over the side, it'll indicate that this is a ocean travel border. And traveling at an ocean border works just exactly the same right now. And we had considered additional limitations, but we really just wanted to keep things straightforward at first, instead of adding further complications for players at this time, and just see how it goes, right? So as of update 56, both the sides of the world will finally be connected, and hopefully that will make East-West wars more exciting. Moving on to the dry dock revamp. So the dry dock was one of the last pieces of content that we developed for the naval update last fall, and there were several things that we really wanted to get to in terms of the visual side and the assets, but due to time limitations, we weren't able to get to them. So in update 56, we finally come back around. We've updated the model. There's a lot more detail. The water, there's actually an animation for water draining and filling up in a dock area now, which before there wasn't any animation. It just kind of snapped to the empty or full state. And we also put some work into the shipbuilding animation so that the arms on the cranes slash arms on the dry dock actually dynamically interact with the object being built or repaired. So we're really happy that we're able to finally come back around and finish this asset in a way that we're happy with. And the other change is a gameplay one. So players are able to now directly transfer items from material pallets and shipping containers from the loading area on the dry dock directly to a specific stockpile on a large ship. And I'll show you how it's done in this video here. This feature was also required for some other changes that we'll talk about later, but I think the other, in general, besides those other changes, it's just really cool to be able to submit items to a specific stockpile. So as you can see here, these torpedoes, a little bit of a spoiler there, Max, on the torpedoes, but so you can now select the stockpile on the submarine, and then you can submit it directly. So as you can see here, the torpedoes are now in the stockpile, directly submitted from the dry dock. And again, with the shipping container here, you'll be able to submit crates directly to a ship. So
Yeah, so what you're looking at is this is the storage ship, right? This is the big freighter looking ship. And you're submitting the crates directly to that stockpile, so you don't need to drive up to it anymore. Good way to load up before landing.
all right, Max, torpedo changes.
Torpedo changes. Why do I get all the really hard to explain ones?
That's your job. Explain the hard features.
Okay, so torpedoes. I guess the main goal with torpedoes here was submarines. When we implemented them, we had a lot of worries with submarines with respect to balance. We were worried about how they might be utilized to create unfair situations, especially since only one side had them. So the goal here was to revisit submarines and give them a role that wasn't exactly the same as every other ship, or as every other damage dealing ship, except that it could go underwater. So we've created. So what we've done here is we wanted to give them a bit of a hit and run role, so that even if they're in a hopeless fight, like against, say, like a destroyer, getting a good hit on a destroyer will have lasting consequences. What will happen is a torpedo will hit the ship and create what's called a large leak. This large leak cannot be fully repaired by the players on board. It will always leak until the ship is brought back to dry dock. These leaks have to be repaired with metal beams as opposed to BMATs. The damage has been dramatically increased, but the total number of torpedoes you can carry on this ship is dramatically reduced. In the past, we knew there was a chance that players would game the torpedoes by like carrying them on their person or putting them in stockpiles, and by that they could increase the carrying capacity of torpedoes like up to something like 30 torpedoes. But so we had to be very cautious about how much damage they could do. Now that we've found a way to make them no longer carryable by players, no longer put into the inventories, they must be brought into these stockpiles. Now we feel like we can really push on them hard and make them really feel impactful and make them feel different. I think we can move to the video, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now you'll need another extra crew member who can wrench the torpedo into its space, and then another player must reload the torpedo. So this becomes a larger operation to get the torpedo into the tube. Both sides will need to be wrenched separately. What you're seeing here is the damage. So the amount of damage that happens is the damage is increased by about 50%. So not tremendous, but what will happen on the ship is it'll push the ship sideways, give it a little bit of a sideways momentum, pushing it possibly off course a little bit. It will kill crew members inside near the explosion. Um, yeah, and then of course it creates that large leak.
So overall, more player effort, but higher impact. Is
Yeah,
that correct?
well,
Yeah.
more player effort on the logistical side of these submarines. It's hard
Mhm.
to, you'll get a couple of shots and then you'll have to return to dry dock to like rearm. And those torpedoes, because they can't be carried, they can't be put into trucks, for example, they have to be moved on pallets, is going to create additional logistical challenges for getting torpedoes to the submarine.
Right. But do you necessarily have to go back to dry dock? I guess we'll answer that in a bit. Sorry, I couldn't. Sorry, Max. I'll leave it at that.
You can't help yourself.
No,
I can't help myself. Okay. Are we ready to move on?
we are.
Great. Let's talk about the new ships here. And we'll change things up and start with the Wardens this time. We usually start with Colonials, right? That's the usual flow.
I don't think that's entirely true, but I think most of the time, yeah.
All right.
And the reason that you wanted to start with the Warden one is because there is no. No.
Wow, Matt. Wow.
So the Warden Light Frigate. I want to say that the main motivation behind adding this one as a priority, which I think we touched on in the dev blog a couple months ago, was we recognized that the important role of the colonial destroyer was to allow a lot more people to engage with naval gameplay um, by building something that was a little bit more manageable by smaller groups. So like 5 or 6 people should be able to gather enough stuff to build a destroyer and then run it themselves if they were committed enough. But the Wardens didn't really have that equivalent. They had the submarine, but the submarine, for all the reasons we stated earlier, it wasn't really seen as a good way to get a lot of people on board. Even if you did get it built, you'd have 5 or 6 people, but the sub only really needed 5 or 6 people to run. So you didn't end up with 30 people, which is our vision for the naval, right? We wanted 30 people getting on these ships. So now the Wardens have a light frigate that smaller groups can build and larger crews can man. And Wardens can get into the game a little bit earlier in the naval gameplay instead of duck and running from destroyers or just spamming the low tech gunboat.
There's an image of the other side, and yeah, is anything more we want to touch on for the
Yeah,
frigate?
I think some of the design stuff. I wish Julian was here to explain this, but some of the design for this was um, we really wanted it to feel compact, smaller, um, a little bit more claustrophobic than the Colonial Destroyer. In terms of like power scaling, we didn't want it to exceed the Colonial Destroyer. Though we think the Colonial Destroyer should be a little bit better than this one. So one of the major weaknesses of this ship is that it only has one ramp. So in the event of flooding, it's going to be a little bit harder to get the water out from below. It has, of course, a ladder into every room, but trying to get the ammo to where it needs to go, get the water out when you're in combat. Fighting in this ship is going to feel tight.
So what you're saying is that the layout of the ship is an intentional part of the design, rather than
Exactly right. Yeah,
than
like
any
you'll
other
see,
reason. Okay.
like a great example of that. You can see at the very front there that there's like a little bit of a deck up front, but in order to do that, to get there, you kind of need to sidle along next to these turrets. Like that's how tight we're talking here, and it's as above, so below. Uh, there's a lot of tightness down inside the rooms as well.
Okay. Shall we move on
Yep.
to the end of the stream? I kid. Uh,
Is it the word?
okay. Hey, Matt started it, so I shall blame him. But
Yeah, you
let's move
can
on
blame
to
me.
the colonial ship.
Very cool.
Yeah, I love the design of this one. This one's so cool. Um, it wasn't included in the video, but that turret on the top is a 120 millimeter artillery cannon, so the ship can like surface and then bombard the shore, or like switch into direct fire and engage ships directly. I don't know why you do that, but you know the options are there. Um, yeah, so the big selling feature of the sub, as many of you have noticed already, is the open top hatch. Um, so we discussed earlier the changes to the torpedoes and that they have a much larger logistical cost in that submarines must return to dry dock in order to rearm their torpedoes. Well, this submarine doesn't have that limitation. You could rearm this ship with a crane and a pier and a pallet of torpedoes. This ship can be rearmed anywhere using a crane. So this means that the ship could be used for more like longer range operations, could be out a bit longer, um, and can engage more frequently. The big downside is, of course, that the ship is much larger than the Warden sub, so it's might be easier to hit underwater, and it's a little bit slower moving. I think what I'm most excited to see is something that we've tested internally but have never seen in a live game is sub versus sub combat. We actually implemented the mechanics for sub versus sub combat for the naval update last year. Many of you astute observers may have noticed in the Warden submarine that the gunner has a mouse wheel to change the depth of the torpedoes that they can fire at. But because the Colonials didn't have a submarine, there never existed a reason to set this to anything other than 0. So now you do. So what I'm really excited to see in Dev Branch any footage of you guys have of like sub versus sub combat. Let me know if it's even possible to hit each other underwater, or if it just remains so mechanically difficult that um, that we'll have to make changes. So excited to see that.
I'm very excited. I think submarine versus submarine combat was one of the things I was personally most excited to see when we first started talking about the naval update. And the expectation is not necessarily that this is going to be the most common thing, but even as a less common thing, it's just really happy to finally get that in there, because that was one of the very original goals when we started working on this whole thing. And here's the both sides of the submarine, and I believe that brings us to the end of the stream. Two things to note: Dev Branch opens up this afternoon, so look out for that. Again, please leave us all your feedback, and we're going to be listening over the next week, and ready to make any tweaks and changes and fixes that are needed. And the other thing, as we usually do after the stream, we're going to have a brief Q&A on Reddit. We are quite busy, so we may not be able to get to as many questions as we usually do, but we will do our best. So once that goes up, please leave your questions there, and please try to keep them as focused as possible on this update, because those are going to be the questions that we're going to prioritize. And yeah, I think that is. Yeah.
1 second. Speaking of a QA, because people asked a good question in chat. Yes, the Wardens will get mines. Torpedoes now can be built by both Wardens and Colonials, and mines can be built by Wardens and Colonials. And there were a whole host of other submarine changes to support this stuff. So a lot of the bugs you guys were reporting over the last few months, we've worked on those to help make submarines more viable. So expect to read those in the patch notes on the dev branch, as Mark was saying.
Absolutely. The release notes contain a lot of things not in this stream. And on that point, in terms of the bug fixes, this is probably one of our largest bug fixes pass we've ever done. So please take time, read through everything in the release notes, which should be coming alongside with that branch. And Matt, I think that's it.
Okay, well, if there is nothing else, then thank you for joining us on this or update. I was going to say Devstream preview. It wasn't a preview to the stream. No, this update 56 preview. There's some exciting stuff in there. I'm really excited about the sub personally. That's one of the coolest things I think we've done. So I'm really excited to see some of that underwater footage. It's just going to be really tense. I think that's definitely what I'm most looking forward to. But with that, yeah, I guess the only thing left to say is stay foxy.
See you guys.